Hello. I feel like I need to take a picture of how full this room is right now.
It's pretty great.
Let's
Although
see.
we have plenty of room in this front row.
Okay, on the count of three, everybody say life it to you. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So lesson learned, you have to get here early if you want a good seat. We have people that arrive at 9 o'clock to make sure they get their seat. I don't think you have to get here that early. But I know Jeff and Sharon, are they in here? They went to the cafeteria this morning, so.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
I was noticing, Vicki, all the people visiting with each other, and that makes me so happy to see you all just making connections and reconnecting with old friends. It's just a wonderful part of this program and this committee that you have formed.
And we're also really thankful for our members that have brought guests today. So not to call any of the guests out, but can the guests raise their hands? I think we've had a lot. We have had a lot of guests today, so we are super excited to have you.
Yes,
we hope you enjoy
you.
the session today and consider becoming a member, because as you can see, this is a fun community to be a part of. So.
All right, well, we'll get started. So welcome, everyone. I'm Mimi Johnston, and of course, this is Vicki Wilkins. We hope you enjoyed last week's presentation by organizations of some of Seneca County's senior-focused nonprofits. We are excited for today's presentation, The Millionaire Boom, Tiffin's Millionaire Boom, and Historic Homes by Tim McKee. But before we begin, of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, Andrew Kalnow, our gold sponsors, the Seneca County Regional Chamber of Commerce, Destination Seneca County, and Klaus Construction. Our silver sponsors, Mercy Health, Tiffin, and Dr. Robert Dornauer, DDS. And our friends of Life at TU, the Allen Irie Center, AVI Food Systems, Brenda Collins, Edward Jones, through Elaine Doherty, Chris Lee, Hannah Luring, and Rachel Tate, the Rotary Club of Tiffin Foundation, and Lang Gordon Rannigan and Klaus Law Firm. As always, we want to express our thanks to our facilities and technical teams, as well as the volunteers who take such good care of all of us. And Mike, of course, on the golf court. Yes. Our fellow institutional advancement team members help us make all this possible.
So today's session, as Mimi said, is Tiffin's Millionaire Boom and Historic Homes. We are excited to have the director of the Tiffin Historic Trust, Tim McKee, with us to share a look into the lives of some of the intrepid businessmen who helped Tiffin become a prosperous community in its early days. Tim McKee was born and raised in Tiffin and several of Tiffin's oldest families, and counts among his family names Phillips, Steinmetz, and McGowan. As so many did, Tim moved away to attend college and began his career with 25 years in Sacramento, California. Many other job-related moves took him to areas such as Las Vegas, Seattle, Fort Lauderdale. However, in 2021, Tim and his family returned to Tiffin. Professionally, Tim has a background in accounting and has worked in accounting and business operations systems and consulting industry for almost 30 years. Even at a young age, Tim was interested in history and enjoyed the various history courses throughout his childhood. His family was also quite interested in history, especially historical architecture, and they made many trips to the various museums and building tours in the surrounding area. Upon returning to Tiffin, Tim was invited to join the board of the Tiffin Historic Trust, and shortly thereafter offered the presidency, which he gladly accepted. Tim is heavily involved in the trust and is devoted to the mission of the Historic Trust. In addition, Tim sits on the board of directors of the Tiffin Foundation for the Advancement of the Arts, TFAA, an organization devoted to providing resources and services to the area's artistic community, particularly traditional physical artistic pieces, music, and theater. Let's please give a warm Life at TU welcome to Tim McKee.
Yep, I think it's, okay. Yep, looks like we're on. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Just one quick correction to what Vicki said. Businessmen and women, because we are going to talk about Della Laird as well. So, sorry. So just a quick correction there. pretty incredible to have a woman millionaire, and we're going to talk about her a little bit more, a little bit further down the road. And so, yeah, Vicki gave a great introduction on myself. You know, I think I'm another one of those that left town and came back, like actually so many of these people that we're going to talk about today, that emigrated to the area. I think Tiffin's really a special place, especially living in so many different communities around the country. And, you know, and so many of us choose to come back, which is really nice for the community and really a testament to Tiffin itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. We're going to talk about a little bit about how Tiffin got started, a little bit about the history, and then we're going to go into some of the people as well as their homes. And so, brief introduction on myself again, and then we're going to talk about how Tiffin got its start. Okay, so in 1812, General Ball was basically setting up different forts during the War of 1812. And he was traveling from Upper Sandusky to Lower Sandusky, which is now commonly referred to as Fremont. And along the way, he ran across Tiffin. Well, the area now commonly referred to as Tiffin, and basically established Fort Ball. Fort Ball was largely a supply fort. There really wasn't much fighting going on here. It was really more of a supply installation. And that's really how people started coming here. You had different Army individuals that were coming to work in the fort, and they really got to learn about the community, the area, and the great things about it. One of the things that they noticed was the fertile farmland. And so a lot of them, as they came back again after the war, really settled here because of that fertile farmland. Talking about the fort again, it is approximately where Monument Square is on Frost Parkway, if you know where that is. That is approximately the location of the fort itself. And there is a tree in kind of wrapped in fencing along Frost Parkway as well. That tree, from what I understand, or legend says, that tree was actually a portion of the fort itself, of the stockade. They actually built it into the stockade itself. And that tree still lives today over on Frost Parkway. So kind of a neat little thing. I often wondered about it myself. Why is that kind of encased in fencing? And came to find out why that happened. So basically, the War of 1812 wrapped up. The Army basically dissipated and went back to their homes. A lot of them went back, back east, where a lot of them lived. And then decided where they were going to live. Are we going to stay here, or are we going to, investigate the new frontier, which was largely Ohio at that point? And several people started coming back. The first was in 1817, so a few years after the fort had been closed. Aristus Bow was our first settler. He built a log cabin pretty much about in the middle of Washington Street at Frost Parkway. Obviously, there wasn't a street there at that point, but that's where he built his home, and it was referred to as the Pan Yan Tavern. So as he got, and that also kind of plays into Pan Yan. There was a Pan Yan restaurant at one point. Now we have the Pan Yan bookstore as well. So that's kind of where that Pan Yan comes from. A little interesting tidbit. So, he settled, then more people started coming. As people settle in an area, more and more people come. More and more people came. That then established a town called Oakley. Um, and then shortly after that, an individual, 1823, Jesse Spencer, bought about a little bit over 400 acres of land on the north side of town, kind of in that area surrounding the town of Oakley. And he actually decided he didn't like the name Oakley, and he decided that he wanted the town to reflect the association with Fort Ball. So he changed the name to Fort Ball. Fort Ball remained as an actual town until 1850, when Fort Ball merged with Tiffin. Interestingly, the two towns on the two sides of the street, or two sides of the river, were actually bitter rivals, even down to street planning. One of the things that on the south side of town we know about, like Circular Street. Why is it called Circular Street? Because original city planners planned on Circular Street really encasing both towns and basically being a whole circle. However, Fort Ball didn't like that idea. They didn't want to work with Tiffin, so therefore Circular Street is not circular. So kind of an interesting little thing. And then, 1850, they start working together, and then eventually, as we all know, we're one big happy family, and don't really refer to Fort Ball as much anymore. Another individual that came to town in 1820, Josiah Hedges, or came to the area. 1820, he purchased a large swath of land on the south side and established Tiffin, naming it after Ohio's first governor, Edward Tiffin. And then just a couple of years after that, Seneca County was established. And Tiffin actually beat out Republic for being the county seat. So another little interesting thing I found out along the way. A couple of building that had gone on along the line, especially when we're talking about courthouses. 1836 was our first courthouse. We had a fire in that courthouse. It burned down, and in 1841 we built a new one. Again, a wood structure. And then in 1884, they built the majestic courthouse, which we all know is no longer with us. But that was torn down in 2012, which is really a sad thing for the Historic Trust to have lost that building. We're really dedicated to trying to save those historic structures. So hopefully we don't have those things happening in the future. So that's a little bit about how Tiffin got its start. I'm going to transition a little bit into industry a little bit, because a lot of these people that came to town then established businesses, which then grew, et cetera, which then obviously created our Millionaires. In 1871, we had our first sawmill. 1822, Josiah Hedges built the first of several grist mills. The Civil War actually, during the Civil War, his grist mill over on Riverside Drive actually was destroyed. He then rebuilt that, and that is now the current existing Pioneer Mill. So. Let's see, 1827, we had our first tannery, which is actually on the site of the current City Hall on the corner of Market and Monroe. At that time, there were no bridges that crossed the river. Josiah Hedges decided to start a ferry service. And kind of right at the end of Market, where Market, basically heads into the river, there was basically a ferry service that crossed you over into, the Fort Ball side. And so that's how people got back and forth across the river. And guess what? he made money because it was a toll bridge. So on the backs of everybody else, he's lining his coffers. 1832, we had our first newspaper, which was the Seneca Patriot. And then in 1888, really something incredible happened that really sparked the industrial expansion in Tiffin and the Seneca County area. They discovered natural gas. Large reserves of natural gas that made the area open for further industrial expansion. We saw that with several businesses moving to town and opening. 1882, National Machinery moves to Tiffin from Cleveland. From what I understand, largely because of those natural resources and things like that in the area. The glass house also needed natural gas for the furnaces and things like that to make the glass. We also have a lot of the natural resources right here in the ground for glass making, which is why the region, not only here in Tiffin, but all the way up into Toledo, et cetera, is big in the glass making industry. So that's the glass house. Also, similarly, Great Western Pottery, which then eventually became American Standard, making what we all know, the commodes. And unfortunately, that's, obviously, the glass house closed in, I believe, 1981 or 82, somewhere around there. The operation, I believe, closed down quite a bit before that, but the actual store and all of that closed down in the early 80s. And then American Standard, as we all know, closed as well. Webster in 1986, okay, brain fart. 1906, Webster came. 1920, our own Ballreichs, which we all, well, most of us all love, and many others. So not only did we have these large businesses coming to town, the factories and things like that, but then we also needed supporting businesses. We needed merchants. We needed sawmills to build the factories and the homes and the businesses and all of that. So a lot of these other businesses were started and growing because of the growth of the factories. And at one point, the population was up to 22,000. We're at about 18,000 now, so we've been on a little bit of a decline. However, I think this is an indication of times changing. Back in the early days, a lot of people wanted to live in town, and out in the country, mostly it was farms. Nowadays, we see as we drive around out in the country, we see a lot of people moving out into the country as well. So I think some of that population change is really kind of a shift in how people wanted to live. Kind of talking about how people lived, back in the early days, before electricity, they basically entertained a lot. People, especially the wealthy, they built these large homes to be able to entertain. A lot of them with even ballrooms and things like that in the home itself, so that they could have these large parties. They would bring in musicians and different people to entertain their friends and relatives. And because of that, they again built these massive houses. Well, if you have a massive house on a large swath of land, what do you also need? You need staff, exactly. So, again, it's building the economy. More and more people move to town. Staff, a lot of times, on some of the large estates, staff would live on the estate. Sometimes they would live in the main house. Many of these houses also had, a lot of times, rather elaborate carriage houses. For instance, the Cunningham House, which is the current Tiffin Board of Education Administration building, used to have a fabulous carriage house behind. I don't know if anybody lived in it, but it was just a beautiful carriage house. again, no longer with us, but a beautiful building nonetheless. But a lot of people, they had their servants living out there. Another difference in those times is that a lot of times when they would entertain, you would have people, you would greet people into a parlor, and that was your initial mingling of people. A lot of times then you would have dinner, and then after dinner, men and women would separate into their own parlors. So there would be a men's parlor and a women's parlor. If you were very wealthy, you might have a reception parlor and then separate men's and women's. In some families, if they weren't that wealthy, they didn't have, they maybe didn't have that formal parlor and they just had the men's and women's. So again, another reason for having such large homes. Couple of little tidbits as well. One thing that I learned, and I have not been able to substantiate this, but I have heard that there was an answer on Jeopardy. What town had the largest number of millionaires per capita? The answer was Tiffin. I even reached out to the producers, to the show itself. Could I get an answer, a true answer on that? I don't know, but a lot of people have said yes, they were aware of that. So I believe that is true. Another thing, another little interesting tidbit, the $100,000 bar. A lot of people say that was actually invented by a confectioner here in town. Again, not substantiated. I haven't been able to find that, but I have seen several references to that being a possibility. And the Historic Trust, we were gifted the Grammas Brown House, and Peter Grammas was a confectioner here in town. Don't know if he had anything to do with the candy bar, but just an interesting Tiffin connection as well. Oh, and then, okay, sorry, I forgot to switch my slide here. So a little bit of history there on coming to Tiffin. The other, sorry, I gave away the answer. So if I was a millionaire in 1850, anybody, hopefully nobody caught it too quick, what that would be in 1950 and then again in 2024.
Well, if you were a millionaire, it'd be $1 million.
Well, because of adjusting of inflation and everything else, what would it be worth today? So, today, about $40 million. 1950, $13 million, $40 million today. So, and this was one of the first things when Mimi asked me to do this. One of the first things that popped into my head, I'm like, okay, amassing $1 million today compared to amassing $1 million in 1850, what would that difference be? So, think about that. Nowadays, yeah, it's a big deal to amass $1 million, even today. But think about trying to amass $40 million to be that equivalent of $1 million in 1850. So really kind of, when we talk about that, it's like, wow, we had that happen in Tiffin? And even today, I mean, it's kind of hard to know, what people are worth, people in town now. But it's interesting kind of thinking about, do we have anybody in town that's worth $40 million or more? Don't know. It's a possibility, but usually we kind of find out more about their wealth and all of that after they're no longer with us. So we might find that out down the road a little bit. So that's kind of a little bit about history and kind of talking about some little tidbits, how people lived and things like that. And now we're going to go into some of our different millionaires in town. So Rez and Sean, probably one of our most famous as well. He was born in 1822 in Berkeley, West Virginia. In 1832, he was on a trip with his brother, and his brother brought him to Tiffin because he had heard about this community with these, vast farmland was available for sale at cheap prices, and the land was very fertile. It was surrounded by a lot of swampland at that time. And basically what they learned was that with the rivers and the creeks and everything around the area, they could easily drain these swamps, and that basically exposed that very rich farmland. So anyway, at 21 years old, Rez and Sean moves to Tiffin. He and his brother started a store and basically began as merchants. Resin then went on to start many other businesses as well. Hotels. We all know the Sean Hotel. Well, I think most of us know the Sean Hotel. That is actually the second Sean Hotel property at that location. That was actually, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but it was actually built in 1906 by his second wife, Della, as a tribute to him. But he did build there was a Sean Hotel at that location that he built, which was called the Sean House, and that was built in 1850. He also built what he called Sean's Commercial Block. We now typically refer to that as the Laird Building, which is basically the Laird Arcade. That was the Sean Block. That's where he had all of his stores. And then his second wife, Della, renamed it the Laird Building after his death. He also built, in 1866, built the Gibson Hotel. That building does still exist downtown. It is kind of across the street from Tiffin Savings Bank, kind of in that area. It looks rather decrepit at this point, although there is an effort to rehab that and turn it into a boutique hotel. And from what I understand, it's very close to getting the final funding on that. So if anybody has any extra money, talk to TSEP, because they are looking for somebody else to get that done, which I think would be wonderful to have, a nice hotel downtown again. Just kind of another little side note, at TFAA, the Tiffin Foundation for the Advancement of the Arts, we're building a theater inside the old church on the corner of Madison and Jefferson. So we love the idea of having a theater or a hotel downtown to bring people into town. We're going to be doing some things a little bit different in theater, doing it in the Round. We actually did a Theater in the Round event here in the Osceola earlier this summer. So look for that coming, but just a little side note and kind of a comment about the hotel, that it'd be wonderful to have that in service. And bring more people back into Tiffin again. Let's see. Another business that Resin started, the First National Bank. So he got into banking as well. So he became rather diversified. And he was also a rather large landowner throughout the country. He had properties all over the country that he had purchased. A little bit about his personal life. In 1839, he married Elvira Tuller. She passed away, and he later married Della Laird. They were approximately 40 years difference in age. So she was quite a bit younger. But, and we're going to talk about her as well specifically, but a very shrewd businesswoman. She actually studied under Rezin, working in his business office for many years. That's how they got to know each other. And, obviously as his first wife passed, he developed a relationship with Della. Unfortunately, they didn't have too many years together. It was, I believe it was like 6 or 7 years together, and he passed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about her history a little bit later when we talk about her. At the time of his passing, his estate was valued at over $1 million at that point. And most of it all went to Della. And they lived here in the picture there at 28 Clay Street. You might recognize that. This is the current Seneca County Museum. It was built in 1853 for his first wife in a Greek Revival, largely Greek Revival style. There's some interesting things on the house. One of the things that apparently has puzzled preservationists over the years, and probably John Huss could really talk about this. The front door is interesting from a style perspective. It's recessed frame with some Doric pilasters, side lights, and a transium. But it also has 2 iconic columns in front, which is really more common in the 20th century. So it was, apparently that's kind of interesting having those columns there back in the 1800s, or that style of column in the 1800s. It also has more of a federal style window really above the front door, which is really more federal style as opposed to the Greek Revival. So kind of a mixture of different architectural styles. The house remained in the family for many, many years until a descendant of Rezin's, Lynn Troxel, donated the home to Seneca County for use as the museum. So that's a little bit about Rezin. Any questions on Rezin? Yeah.
Did they have any kids?
That I didn't look into. Sorry. I imagine they did, but well, yeah, because they have descendants, so they had to. Yeah.
Rezin Sean and his brother Lorenzo came here and bought property. Where was their original wealth from?
That I don't know either. I don't know where that came from. Anything else? Okay. And so now we're going to move on to Della. As we just talked, Della was Rezin's wife. She was known as Tiffin's first woman. She was quite a formidable businesswoman, from what I understand, and really loved Tiffin. We're going to talk about how she moved here, she moved away, she moved back, and really apparently fell in love with Tiffin, and really donated back a lot to the Tiffin community. She was actually born in 1853 in Lamar, Pennsylvania.
That's where my sister lives.
Oh, very cool. 1853 she was born. Oh, oops.
I put that on because I found it online.
Oh, well, and the interesting thing is you're doing research going back sometimes. I found dates that were not necessarily consistent. So what I tried to do was the most common is what I would use. So it's around that time period. Even my own grandmother, who we think was born in 1900, some people say she was born in 1899. And her original birth certificate was destroyed, so nobody knows. But just even at that time, we didn't have very good records. But she moved to Tiffin at the age of 18 with her family. Not sure why her family moved here, but they did, and she moved with them. She went on to attend Oberlin College, and then she went to work for Reverend Sean in the business office. 4 years later, she married him, and unfortunately 6 years after that, Resin passes away. Within a few years later, she then meets a gentleman, William Laird. William Laird was from Minnesota and was a lumber salesman. And that's how he made his fortunes. She married William and she moved to Winnetka, Minnesota. And roughly, 21 years later, William passes away. And guess what? Della inherits another vast fortune. So again, several millions of dollars that she inherited from him. And then in 1924, so about 5 years after William passes away, Della moves back to Tiffin again. I'm guessing she loved the community. She fell in love with Tiffin, and she really wanted to come back and be back in Tiffin again. She then purchased a home at 400 Melmore. We'll talk about a little bit about the home here in just a little bit. But that home still exists as well. It's currently owned by the Forrest family. Ann Forrest, who's the clerk of courts, she's kind of managing that for the family. Okay. At one point, Della was the 8th richest woman in Ohio. Not only from her inheritance, but also, again, I've mentioned, she was a shrewd businesswoman. So she continued to grow and expand that wealth as well. And historians estimate at her death that she was worth somewhere between about $5 to $10 million. Which today, anybody do the calculation real quick? 86 to $172 million in today's value. So I don't know. To me, I cannot even imagine having that kind of money. Yeah, I mean, and what would you do with it? That actually plays in nicely with my next topic, which is legacy. So some people, some of these people really love giving back to the community. And so, and Della was big on building and giving back to Tiffin. She renamed the Sean's commercial block. I don't know why I have a problem with that. It just doesn't roll off right. Renamed the commercial block to the Laird Building after her second husband. Not sure why she did that. I kind of find that interesting myself. That Sean built it, but then she renamed it after the second husband. Well, yeah, maybe after herself as well. Yeah, true. But also in I think it was 1906. Yeah, 1906, the rebuilt Sean Hotel is built and opened. So she did honor her first husband there by naming that as well. And that still exists. That's a retirement community downtown as well. So wonderful to be able to save that. Little story, I mean, probably most people know about the story of when that burned. I remember, okay, good, some people don't. I was quite young. I believe that burned in 1976, 77. And I remember as a kid, there were quite a few fires that had gone on downtown. And we heard about the Sean was on fire. So we got up, it was in the evening, and went down, and it was a frigid, cold day, and watched the fire. My dad had an old 8mm camera, and he was like, I'm gonna go home and get the camera. So he ran home, got the camera. During that time period, power was out to the building. However, the neon sign lit up HOT, the first 3 letters of hotel. Yeah, I saw, that one I can prove because I saw it myself. Unfortunately, my father, by the time he got back with the camera, the HOT was out again and it never reappeared. But interesting, it's like, why did that happen? So yeah, interesting story about when that burned. Wonderful how we preserved that building. Rather quickly, they put a new roof on it to protect it. It did sit vacant for many, many years, as many of us know, but has been repurposed and reused. So it's wonderful to see that happening. See, talked about that. Oh, okay. A couple of other legacy type things that Della Laird was involved in. Heidelberg Science Hall. She paid for all of the construction of that. She was a big benefactor for Heidelberg as well. She also built the original YMCA, which is where the Grogan Bank is, on the corner of Market and Monroe. That was torn down, I believe, in the early 80s and replaced by the bank when the YMCA moved down to Hedges Boyer Park and was added on to the existing community indoor community pool. And then that became obviously our YMCA that we have now. And many, many more. There were a lot of things that Della Laird contributed to. Like so many benefactors of a community, it's hard to name everything that she did, but kind of highlighting some of her major contributions. As a testament to that, when Della passed away, the mayor of Tiffin actually asked all businesses to close for her funeral. And the vast majority did. They closed for an hour for that funeral. And some businesses closed for the entire day to honor her. So that was quite a thing. And I think one of the things that really struck me about her in doing this research is, thinking about what was going on at the time. Women were fighting for rights, fighting for rights to vote. And we have an incredibly rich woman in Tiffin growing businesses and giving back to our community and things like that. So I think, again, just thinking about the history and the time, really just incredible for a woman like this to do the things that she did. So talking a little bit about her home, which I mentioned on Melmore Street. It does still exist today, as I mentioned. It was built in 1861 by John Loomis, who was a resident of Tiffin at the time. It is in an Italianate style. Della purchased the home upon arriving back in town again and embarked on an extensive renovation. She added the hip roof and the changes to the front porch. She added the Georgian portico and Corinthian columns. She added additional rooms. There were the brick pillars and the iron fencing across the front that we see there today. That was added at that same time. And that house remained in the family for quite a few years as well. Lynn Troxell, I believe, was the one that went through another major renovation. Lynn Troxell was a descendant, again. He went through another major renovation on the house and actually stripped off a third floor that was original to the house. As we see now, the house is 2 stories, but there was a third floor, and so he made it smaller. He also went through and removed several of the additions that Della had added to make the house a little bit smaller. Currently, it's about 5,600 square feet. So, I don't know, to me, I mean, I live in about 1,800 square feet myself, and it's quite comfortable. You know, I get tired of cleaning sometimes, so I can't imagine, but then I don't have staff. So I can only imagine. I have not found what the original or the largest square footage was. But at 5,600 square feet with a third story and additional, it must have been quite a rambling place. Also, another change that Lynn Troxell made to the house was he added a lower portico on the house, on the back. Oh, yeah, I already talked about that. So, and that's a little bit about Della. Any questions on?
Are there any pictures of her?
I do have some. I didn't put them in the, I usually kind of do kind of a simple, without a lot of slides on the presentation. I don't know, myself I find it kind of distracting at times, but yeah. Okay. I think we can probably do one more before the break. Okay, cool. My next one, James Blair. James Blair is not as well known as some of the others. I tried to pick some different people. James Blair was born in 1914, and he passed away in 2005. His house was built in 1882 originally. It is in an empire style, and it is part of the Frost Village at this point. James Blair was a successful banker and businessman. He was a cashier at Commercial National Bank. And back then, bankers were I think maybe a lot more respected than now. Now it's, just much more of a transactional type transaction. But bankers were a lot more respected, a lot better paid than now. So he was a banker. He later went on to make millions on Wall Street. And then eventually, what did he do? He returned to Tiffin again. And that's when he moved into this home. And a couple of things that he did. He was a huge benefactor for Heidelberg as well. Interesting, I don't have people from TU, now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, next one. There was talk in the kind of towards the late 1800s, in the 1870s, about moving Heidelberg somewhere else.
James Blair was very adamant that he did not want this to happen. And so he was instrumental in keeping Heidelberg here in Tiffin. So that's probably one of his biggest legacies was keeping people here in, or keeping Heidelberg here in Tiffin. So as I mentioned, his home built in 1882. It's an Empire-style home with the mansard roof. Is pretty common with those. And as I mentioned, that is in Frost Parkway. It is currently an Airbnb. Andrew Kell now owns that. And really did a loving restoration on it. We at the Trust have a Historic Preservation Award for that home. So, and that's James Blair. Any questions about him? Okay. Yes, from what yeah.
What was the question?
Did he live in Tiffin when he died? Oh. Yeah, yeah, he lived here the rest of his life. Okay.
Yeah, we can take a
Do that. Do you want to do that now? Just
It's up to you.
if we do.
We have about 7 or 8 minutes until 11. We could do it now, or if you wanted to keep going, we can do that.
I think why don't we break now in between and then yeah, cool.
All right, why don't we show back up at
Okay, here, Mimi. Mimi.
Sorry.
11:05. Thank you. We'll take a break and come back around 11:05. Thank you.
This is fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Not a problem.